All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Build Heritage Subcommittee meeting for January 14th, 2020, 1st of 2020. I'll call our members to order. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed designation of the Mullein driveway and Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District, listed as item 1 on today's agenda on the Ontario Heritage Act. Only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comments on these amendments. We have regrets today from Councillor McKenney. Are there any declarations of interest? None today. Confirmation of minutes. Are the minutes from the meeting of December 10th, 2019 confirmed? Confirmed? Thank you. Okay, we have 2 items on the agenda. We're going to hold the first item because there's a presentation from staff and we have speakers. The second item is the extension of the heritage permit for 255 McKay Street. Now, I do have a speaker, but if the committee is prepared to carry this one, do you need to speak? It's Lloyd Phillips. Okay. Are there any questions from the committee, or do we need to hold this one for any reason? All right. Are the report recommendations carried then? Carried? Thank you. Okay, so we will go to the first item. So this is phase 2 of the Clemeau Estate Heritage Conservation District Study, including designation of the Mullein driveway and Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District. We have a presentation this morning from Mackenzie Kim. Mackenzie, over to you.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So the item before you this morning is as the chair mentioned, it's the proposed designation of the Mullein driveway and Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District and the adoption of the corresponding HCD plan. I'm excited to present this item this morning. It's the final product of the second phase of the Clemeau Estate Heritage Study. So this has been a pretty large project and it's been ongoing for a number of years. So what I'd like to do this morning is just give a bit of an overview of how we got here today and then get into a summary of the plan. So I'll try and be brief, but I might be a little longer than usual. So hopefully you can bear with me. So just to situate everyone, the proposed district is located in the north end of the glebe, south of the downtown core. It includes 2 areas outlined in red on the screen, the properties adjacent to Clemeau Avenue between Bronson and Bank Street, and the properties along Mullein Avenue and Linden Terrace east of O'Connor Street to the Rideau Canal, as well as Patterson Creek Park. So here are some photos of the area today. The area is characterized by its park-like setting, symmetrical boulevards framed by mature trees, and the impressive historic houses. So this project came about at the direction of City Council back in 2004 to study this area and understand the cultural heritage value of Central Park and the properties adjacent to it. So the first phase resulted in the designation of the Clemeau Estate East Hcd in 2011, and this second phase satisfies the requirements of that 2004 Council direction. So the process for designating an HCD really involves 2 phases, the study and the plan. So the study phase was to determine if the area merits designation as a district under Part 5 of the Act. And the study kicked off back in 2016, and with the help of the Glebe Community Association and Heritage Ottawa volunteers, the study examined the history of the area, its architectural character, and its context to evaluate its significance. So the study included research and analysis of the area as a whole and also documented all properties within the boundaries. So the full results and recommendations of the study are attached to the staff report as document 3. And the study revealed that the area does have cultural heritage value. That's why we're here today. And based on the reasons for designation, it also established the boundaries for the district as shown on the map on the screen. So there are approximately 160 properties in the proposed district, and the properties that contribute to the character are shown in red. So there are only 14 that do not contribute to the character, so the area is very much intact. The Ontario Heritage Act requires that City Council adopt by bylaw an HCD plan for all new designated HCDs, and it includes specific requirements for what to include. So I've included those on the screen before you. An Hcd plan that meets the requirements has been completed, and it's included as document 2 to the report. I won't go through the plan in its entirety this morning, but I'd like to just give a bit of a summary. So the objectives, those really provide the high-level framework for the ongoing conservation of the district's heritage value. I've noted a few of them on the screen, but in general, they relate to conserving the heritage value and attributes identified in the plan, promoting best practices and approaches to repair and making alterations, and ultimately managing how the area changes over time. The Statement of Cultural Heritage Value, it's essentially the foundation of the plan in that it outlines the reasons why the HCD is important. For the Clement-Monklin Driveway and Linden Terrace HCD, the statement was written in collaboration with a working group that we set up, as well as members of the community through drafts made available at public meetings. So the full statement is in section 3 of the plan, but just to summarize, the district has been identified for designation for its design value as a highly intact example of an early 20th century streetcar suburb with direct historical associations with a number of key individuals such as Henrietta Clement and her cousin William Powell, and the trends they really represent in Ottawa's history of what was then suburban development. But also its connection with development as part of Ottawa's parkway and driveway network. Clement and Monklin Avenues and Linden Terrace form one of the only residential extensions of the Ottawa Improvement Commission's driveway. So the Ottawa Improvement Commission was the predecessor to the National Capital Commission. Together with Patterson Creek and its surrounding parklands, this area is significant for its association with early Canadian landscape architect Frederick Todd and his 1903 plan for Ottawa's parkways and driveways, and also the beautification of the National Capital by the OIC. So these values are expressed by physical attributes noted in section 3 of the plan, and a few of those include the symmetrical tree-lined boulevards with the distinctive cement light standards framed by the impressive historic houses consistently set back from the street, which reflect a mix of architectural styles, complex roof lines, and decorative architectural elements, as well as structures like the Patterson Creek Bridge and views to and from it. So in order to preserve these values, the plan also includes policies and guidelines for assessing how changes in the area should be approached. So the policies are intended to be the required components, while the guidelines offer a bit more discretion, recognizing that there might be different strategies for achieving the overarching policy. The guidelines also offer more technical advice. And these policies and guidelines are implemented through a heritage permit process, and that's required under the Act for exterior alterations on properties included within the boundary. So the plan's divided into 5 sections, and those sections are on the screen before you. Within those sections, there are policies and guidelines that distinguish between contributing and non-contributing properties. Within those, it's also subdivided by the most common types of alterations that we typically see in districts. So for example, in the conservation and repair section, it provides direction and advice for specific elements like restoring porches or roofing. In the new elements section, there's direction for how to incorporate new additions into existing properties, keeping in mind materials and appropriate location. So under the Ontario Heritage Act, the designation of an HCD includes the requirement of a statutory public meeting, and as the chair announced this morning, this meeting satisfies that requirement. The development of the plan has also benefited from a variety of consultation components, and those were outlined in the staff report, but it included 3 public open houses, as I mentioned, a working group set up of representatives from owners on each street, as well as the community association, and we also sent out a variety of notices by mail, advertisements in the newspaper, and via social media. Heritage Ottawa and the Glebe Community Association and the Ward Council were notified of this project and the agenda this morning and are supportive of the project. And I'd also think it's fair to say that the feedback we've received from owners has also been generally quite positive. So just to wrap up, staff have attached the results of the Hcd study for information and are recommending they be received by council. Staff are satisfied that the proposed plan meets the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act and accordingly are recommending the designation of the area under Part 5 and the adoption of the corresponding HCD plan. And just lastly, through the project, we received a number of comments from members of the public regarding the potential for cultural heritage value along Bank Street. So through this study, we did not evaluate Bank Street in the glebe, but staff have received a request from the Community Association to undertake a preliminary heritage study to determine if it warrants designation. And staff agree that it may warrant further investigation. So this last recommendation is to obtain direction to add this to our work plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we move to public delegations, we do have a technical amendment that Vice Chair Quinn is going to read for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Whereas the document 2, Appendix B, Property Inventory Table, attached to the report, identifies 13 Monkland Avenue and 14 Monkland Avenue, and omits 14 Monkland Avenue, both of which are intended to be contributing properties in the proposed Heritage Conservation District. Therefore, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee amend the property inventory table by striking out, quote, 14 Monkland, construction date 1914, unquote, and inserting, quote, 13 Monkland, construction date 1929, unquote. Be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee amend the property inventory table by adding the following property to the contributing properties inventory and adding the photograph of the building on the property as attached to this motion. Address 14 Monkland, construction date 1914.
Okay, thank you. And there is a photo on the back of our paper there. We have one delegation registered to speak from the Glebe Community Association Heritage Committee. We have Bill Price and Johanna Person. If you want to come up to the front. Good morning, Mr. Price. And we do have correspondence on file from the Glebe Community Association Heritage Committee as well as Heritage Ottawa on this item.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, I'm Bill Price, and with my colleague Johanna Pesson, who is trapped at work unfortunately, we are co-chairs of the Glebe Community Association Heritage Committee. On behalf of our committee and the Glebe Community Association Executive and Board of Directors, I wish to confirm our strong support for the motion before you today. This proposed recommendation to Council will, if approved, create a major new heritage conservation district in the glebe that will complement the Clemau Estates East Heritage Conservation District approved in 2011 and the very recent designations under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act of Central Park East and West and the Werner Noffke designed Ambassador Court bordering the park. This action, if approved now, will conserve the largely intact early 20th century public-private development of Patterson Creek Park and Lagoon, Central Park East and West, Linden Terrace, the elegant Monkland-Clemau driveway that crosses the glebe from Queen Elizabeth Drive to Bronson Avenue, and also the important heritage architecture of the approximately 200 homes bordering these parks and streets. While urging you to support this motion, we would also like to thank the many Glebe volunteers, including numerous university students seconded from Heritage Ottawa as research support, all of the people that assisted in the many years of preliminary research to support our request for heritage designation, but especially we want to thank the heritage planning team of the City of Ottawa for their professional guidance, formal research and studies, and effective management of the approval process. Finally, we want to thank the owners, past and present, of these historic properties for their ongoing investment in the heritage architectural integrity of their home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our delegation? Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Thank you for coming today and providing support for the recommendations on behalf of the association. Just one question. Ms. Kim referenced 3 public open houses that were held during this period. Are you aware on behalf of the association of any opposition by members of the community to the recommendations, and if so, on what grounds?
Typically, there would have been a handful, a number, and I spoke to anyone who did have any negative thoughts. Often it was based on misunderstanding of what flexibilities they might in fact have to alter their property. Sometimes simply explaining to them the value of someone choosing to move into the neighborhood because they like the view across the street, reminding them that it's also a reciprocal privilege to that person that you're looking at to look back at your house as well. So there's a community obligation to kind of preserve that public good. But at the same time, as you've seen in the study, there are ample opportunities for flexibility, for expanding the size of even a contributing home. So I think in many ways they've come to appreciate, but the number of people with objections rarely numbered more than a few, and we spoke to all of them.
Thank you. Member Podolsky.
Just a question. Is the Glebe Community Association and Heritage Committee of Glebe Community Association comfortable with the way in which the city is likely to proceed forward with the Bank Street intersection of the Clemo East Heritage Conservation District and the new Clemo Mullein Heritage Conservation District? Because we have seen before serious arm wrestling over the development of an apartment building at that intersection.
At 667.
And what that raised was the question of whether or not there were sufficient articulate guidelines to deal with the Bank Street and the Clemo, Cardo and Decumanus, the big axis of these two important urban places. So I just wanted to know whether or not the Glebe Community Association was comfortable with the way in which the city has positioned the future study of heritage and its impact on these districts along Bank Street. So that's a long question, but I'd like your comments on that.
All right. Yes, I would say that we are happy or content about it. I mean, certainly some of us might have wanted to be more aggressive about including those particular properties, but there is sound logic to the program that the city is putting forward, and that is to deal with the unique aspects of those four corners through zoning rules as opposed to the Ontario Heritage Act. And I think the idea of doing the study more or less simultaneously with the Bank Street height and character study will add credence to that as well. And there's also the public policy statement that's at play here for bordering properties, that that is not silent with respect to what can in fact be built there, but in the end, I'm hoping that specific constraints would be put into the zoning. So we're prepared to work with that, partly because the 667 Bank Street is already gone through and some principles have been established, but I would say yes, Barry.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Price? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to questions for staff. Are there any questions from the committee for staff on this item? Member Podolsky.
I have one, and it's related to the same issue. I'm looking at the Heritage District boundaries that are on the screen here, and could you just bring up the slide which says background? Because I believe there's a conflict there in the boundary edges. If you look at the one called background, you'll see that the Clemo West portion of the proposed Heritage District actually crosses Bank Street. What on earth does that mean?
Thank you, Mr. Podolsky. So it's a good point. So the boundaries were changed from what was proposed as part of the study. So after the fall open house, There was some discussion about the inclusion of these properties, and originally they were included as part of the project, and that was because they were adjacent to Clemo. But after the open house, we did some further investigation, we had some further discussion, and so we determined that these properties, they were non-contributing properties. The buildings on them are commercial, they have historically been commercial, and they are really oriented to Bank Street. So we determined that since they didn't demonstrate the attributes of the remaining properties in the boundaries, we determined it was more appropriate to leave them out of the district boundary and then to include some site-specific policies through zoning.
Could I just suggest that in the future, when slides like this are presented, where there is a change in the boundary from the study area, that in giving the background to the committee and the public, you actually explicitly annotate that. So you say original study area, one color, and then the portion that is excluded from the proposed district highlighted as well. Because if you all remember, we went through a similar kind of thing in the Sandy Hill, Range Road, Russell Heritage Conservation District, where there was a public consultation on the boundaries of the district, and then at the very last minute before it came to this committee, the Egyptian embassy property was gerrymandered out of the district. And I think that that was not made public in time, so I think it's important to educate and track the changes that happen during the course of the process so that it's transparent and clear. So I understand your verbal explanation, but this is just a message that it contributes more to understanding of the process when these things are properly annotated. Thank you.
Sorry, I'd just like to highlight, I do have a section in my staff report that does outline the changes that were made since that fall open house. So it's on the public record, and if anybody has any further questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. I was actually just looking at page 17 of the report that does have the map that accurately reflects what we're being asked to support today. Any other questions from members? Member Conforti.
Yeah, maybe just as a follow-up to Barry's comment, and I don't know if this applies, but I know that the properties that were within the study area were excluded from the Heritage Register. So maybe just look at the changing boundary line again to see if those properties weren't being added to the register or not, just because I know that that was something that I noticed when we reviewed the Heritage Register as well.
Any other questions for staff? Member Halsell.
Yes, just a pragmatic, functional one. In the event that this is approved at council, do you have an approximate timeline on when the Bank Street work would get underway?
So I think the prioritization of the Bank Street work would have to come about through our work plan discussions. There are a number of other districts that we have kind of in the queue, but certainly we'd like to work on that prioritization in the near future, I think. Thanks.
Okay, I'm just looking around the table. Any other questions? I had a question just about, I want to make sure I'm understanding. So in the report recommendations, number 4 is about directing staff to include preliminary heritage conservation district study of Bank Street in the glebe. We already have a number of HCDs in the work plan that we're planning to do. Does this bump any of them? Does this change the sequencing of anything else that we're already planning to do in this term of council?
It's a good question. We are reviewing our work program right now. My initial reaction would be that this would not bump the ones that are in queue, in particular Lower Town and Byward Market, which are the key ones that we want to push forward starting this year. We have to also remember that we are working with our policy group on the zoning study, and we're going to make sure that zoning provisions are put in for Bank Street on these particular properties. So that will give us a bit of, input and a bit of direction for these properties. And also the register project is done and complete, so all the properties on Bank Street do have some form of status, whether they're on the register or not. So we don't see it as a burning issue to pursue right away, but we'll give you a better idea in terms of timing once we finish our work program discussions.
Okay, thank you. I asked because I know these are a lot of time for staff. Mackenzie, you mentioned in your presentation, this glebe study that we're considering today goes back to a 2004 council recommendation. And in a letter from Heritage Ottawa from Mr. Fleming, he mentions it's 15 years of work with staff, with volunteers, with community associations. So it's a significant amount of work. And we have a number of these HCDs that we're targeting in the work plan. So I think it's a positive that we've checked one off the list towards that goal. So thank you for the presentation today. So we need to we need to consider the motion from Vice Chair Quinn, the technical amendment. So let's do that first. Is the technical amendment? Pardon me. Is the technical amendment motion carried? Carried. Thank you. And then are the report recommendations as amended carried? Yes. Carried. Thank you. Okay, so this report will be presented to Council on January 29th at the end of this month. We have no in-camera items today. Are there any notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings? Okay, there are none. Are there any inquiries today? None. We do have a planning circulation included in the agenda for 246 Gilmore Street. It was distributed to members prior to today, and a related heritage application is anticipated to come to our committee later this year. Are there any other items of business today? A question. Member or Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not necessarily formal to document it as an inquiry or other business, but looking at your work plan for 2020, can I just get a better understanding of what that is and where the Carlington Veterans Homes review is in your work plan?
Yeah, we don't have the full list finalized yet, but that is for a 2020 project. Yeah.
Okay, and on adjournment, is the motion carried? Then we are adjourned. Thank you. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February 11th. Thank you, everybody.